This is Tesla cam footage of a Hardware 4 Model 3 using a pretty recent version of full self-driving on a seemingly very simple straight-ahead road with no obstacles whatsoever, when suddenly, completely out of the blue, a sudden veer into the oncoming lane followed by an absolutely massive crash. So what the heck happened here? The poster of the video claims that the steering wheel turned all on its own. He makes it very clear he did not grab it himself, and the car just decided to drive him into the ditch and hit the tree in about a second. He also has a few other posts saying he has no horse in this game, does not own Tesla stock, and is truly devastated that his dream car is totaled. He also requested logs from the incident from Tesla, which they did provide and he posted, but even with all the data, there seems to be a lot of confusion about what actually happened here. So I'm going to do my best to visualize the data in a way that's easier to understand, and we're going to go through frame by frame to see if we can piece together what happened. But before we get into all the telemetry stuff, I gotta say, I think the reason that this video has been getting a massive amount of attention is because if what this guy says is correct and full self-driving suddenly veered off the road and smashed into a tree in like 1 second, giving him no time to correct, it would fundamentally change the way that we think of full self-driving. Especially when Tesla advertises it as a system that doesn't get tired, makes you statistically less likely to be involved in an accident while using it, and something you can trust enough to kind of lean back and relax on your daily commutes. So definitely makes sense to me why this video blew up like it did, but what doesn't make sense to me is just how many people blindly accepted this story as an absolute fact without any evidence. I mean, entire articles were written about this crash with headlines like these that make it seem like an absolute fact, which is just shameful. This unfortunately means that the damage has basically already been done. No matter what the crash data reveals or the vehicle logs and the telemetry and all that, this is basically going to remain a full self-driving crash in the majority of people's minds. I think we're getting the first taste of some of the articles we're going to see about robotaxi as well, so buckle up. So although this video isn't going to undo the damage that has already been done, I can at least give you my take on what I think happened using actual data to support my argument instead of stories. The first piece of data, which you might find rather shocking, is that according to the vehicle logs and the way that Tesla defines what a crash is, this was indeed a full self-driving crash. And that is because any crash that happens within 5 seconds of an autopilot or FSD disengagement is classified as an FSD or autopilot related incident. And we can clearly see on page 1 of the report that it was indeed active 5 seconds before the collision, meaning this incident should be included as an FSD related incident in future safety reports. The autopilot state going unavailable leading up to the collision is a bit confusing. You can see it here too, and many people used it as what they thought was proof that FSD was responsible, but actually any time the user disengages by manually overriding the steering, it immediately goes into unavailable state, which is something that people like Green the Only confirmed, and it's also something that you can try yourself by simply engaging autopilot or FSD, manually overriding the steering wheel, and then immediately trying to turn it back on. The error message you will get is that it's in an unavailable state. Now there is a lot of data in this report that's not super relevant. Like you can see the accelerator pedal and brake pedal was pressed at the same time slightly after the collision, and the speed was about 45 miles an hour when the incident took place. But what we really want to focus on to figure out what happened is the steering wheel angle, the torque being applied to the steering wheel, and the autopilot state. This should show us whether full self-driving actually applied the leftward force on the steering wheel. Now these graphs are a little bit confusing. You can see positive indicates clockwise steering input, so as the graph dips lower, it's actually turning to the left. So in order to correct for this, what we're going to do is flip the graph around and then rotate it 90 degrees. And that way left will mean left and right will mean right. This should make it a lot easier for us mere mortals to understand. Quick disclaimer before we begin. The data provided by Tesla does include timestamps, so I am certain that I have all that part correct, but aligning it to the video is not super easy. I do have a lot of experience overlaying vehicle data onto footage though, and I'm fairly certain that I have the accuracy down to about 1 frame. As you can see, the steering wheel torque coincides perfectly with the impact and also the very small movements after the vehicle had turned over and was rolling back and forth. And with all that said, let's get into what I think the data shows. We're going to be watching this at 1/10 speed and also pausing when I think there's something worth mentioning. The yellow line that you're seeing right now indicates the current telemetry of the vehicle, so anything behind it is the past. Starting out, there's really nothing odd about any of these graphs. You can see full self-driving is on, the steering wheel position is straight, and the steering wheel torque is minimal. Then suddenly, before the oncoming vehicle passes, you can see leftward torque being applied to the steering wheel. Now, if it was full self-driving applying this torque, you'd expect the steering wheel position to also be turning left, but it does not and remains completely straight. Further proof of this is in the next couple of frames, where we can see the steering wheel torque heading in the opposite direction, almost as if full self-driving is fighting against the torque being applied to the steering wheel. Keep in mind, full self-driving is still active at this point. These next few frames are the most critical ones. You can see a massive spike of leftward steering wheel torque, followed by the first indication that the steering wheel is starting to turn left and full self-driving disengaging all at the same time. I think it's important to point out that up until this exact point in yellow, the steering wheel had remained completely straight. And now, with full self-driving completely disabled, we can continue to see leftward steering wheel torque being applied and the steering wheel position continue to move to the left. And the rest of this clip doesn't really need commentary because you know exactly what happens. So now, for the million-dollar question, what was applying leftward steering wheel torque? I don't think we're ever going to know. But I do think it's pretty clear from the data that it wasn't full self-driving like he said it was. And I want to be super clear. I am not calling this person a liar. I think that he believes everything that he is saying, or else why would he go out and release the crash report that implicates him? In fact, he is still online in the threads of the crash report, insisting that it proves that the car turned and crashed itself into the tree. Some of his friends are also in the replies, insisting that despite what the data says, if he said he didn't turn the steering wheel, he didn't, and anything else is copium. XRP, I gotta say, one of us is definitely on some copium right now. In all seriousness, I really do feel pretty bad for the guy who crashed his car here, and I genuinely do not think he's lying. I think if you hooked him up to a lie detector test, he would pass every single time, and I think he 110% believes the story he is telling. I don't want to speculate too much on what I think could have caused this, but I could easily see a knee accidentally bumping the steering wheel and applying enough pressure to disengage full self-driving, or even applying a little bit too much torque to the steering wheel for a nag. I mean, heck, when the NHTSA did their autopilot safety investigation, they found 55 crashes that happened basically the exact same way, when autopilot was disengaged by the user and the user didn't know. Another part of this equation is that the driver was very inexperienced with autopilot and full self-driving. He had only owned the car for a couple of weeks and had less than 1,000 miles total on it. And I know many of you are probably thinking, no, this guy has to be lying, because if I did something like that, I would know. But the human brain can be pretty weird sometimes. There are so many examples of situations like people falling asleep while driving and crashing, and their mind makes up a story about what happened, and they would swear on their lives that it's true.
God damn it, anyway! The guy pushed me in the damn road!
In my opinion, this particular incident falls within the realm of the Tesla unintentional acceleration issues, where people mistake the accelerator for the brake, and they would swear up and down that they were pushing the brake. But when the vehicle logs are produced, every single time, without fail, it ends up being the accelerator that was pressed. The data doesn't lie. Anyways, hope you learned something from this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time. Bye.